Love your neighbor as yourself. Anybody out there is your neighbor. There's no footnote in my Bible that says, oh, but make sure you check their documentation stats first.
Hey, let me ask you a question. Does a border get to dictate who my neighbor is? Let's talk about it with Isaac Villegas on Steve Brown, etc.
He's an old white guy, an author, broadcaster, and seminary professor who's sick of religion. And he's brought friends. Please welcome Steve Brown, etc.
Hey, we're so glad you're here. Giving an hour of your time is a holy and important gift, and we see it as that. In case you're wondering, I'm Steve, the aforementioned old white guy. Matthew Porter is our executive producer. He's here. Matthew says you can't lose your salvation. But if you could, he would have lost it this weekend while trying to install a ceiling fan.
Mistakes were made.
Oh man, I did that. I had to call a friend and said, I have screwed this up so bad. Would you fix it? So he climbed the ladder and I got on my knees and prayed, and we accomplished it without losing my salvation,
there you go.
I might say. Our producer, Jinx, is in the little glass booth. Jinx says, if it's too loud, you're too old.
Where'd you get that one, man?
At least I think that's what he said. Our one-man IT department, John Myers, is in the tech bunker. Sisyphus had a boulder. John has a computer. Dr. George Bingham is the president of Key Light, the economy being what it is. George has taken money out of his 401k and put it in his 2QSM. That's 2 queen-size mattresses. And Kathy Wyatt is the soft feminist side of the program. After listening to these intros for so many years, she has a doctorate in eye rolling. We've got an interesting guest for this program. His name is Isaac Samuel Villegas. And Isaac is an award-winning writer, Mennonite leader. He served as the pastor of Chapel Hill Mennonite Fellowship in North Carolina. By the way, Raleigh, Chapel Hill is stomping grounds for me, and I have an uncle who lived there for years who was a bank embezzler. It's true. Listen, he was good at it. They knew he did it, and he knew that he had done it, and so they agreed to part company. And he lived the rest of his life on stolen money, and so I have a great heritage. At any rate. Isaac served as the pastor of Chapel Hill Mennonite Fellowship for 16 years, and he currently serves as a member of the governing board of the North Carolina Council of Churches. Isaac is a contributing editor to the Christian Century magazine. And by the way, Isaac, I served on the executive board of Christianity Today, which will give us where we're coming from, both of us. I did that for over 20 years. He's a part of the editorial committee of the Anabaptist Witness Journal, and his articles have appeared in numerous publications. And his new book, which I hold in my nicotine-stained fingers, is Migrant God, a Christian vision for immigrant justice. As you know, if you've been with this program very often, I'm very opinionated. And I must say, And I've told Isaac that we're going to disagree on a whole lot of stuff. A number of years ago, I did a television program, a national television program. And we had a lesbian on, and her associate, a lesbian pastor, and she looked like Aunt B. I mean, sweet, nice lady. And the producer said to her, look, I know you've been attacked, but Steve won't do that, and you'll love being here. And she did. And then the next week they fired me, so that'll give you an idea. And here, George, you wouldn't fire me if I got a lot of letters and stuff, would
it
you?
be more than normal?
Isaac, we want to hear, and I've been reading your book, and your compassion and your mercy and the obvious Christian way with which you deal with this issue is a good thing. Talk to us about how God is a migrant.
Yeah, well, thank you, Steve, for having me on. And as far as I know, I'm not a lesbian, so I don't think you're going to get fired this time around. Yeah, so I wrote this book talking about how immigrant justice work in this. I mean, my parents are immigrants, so this is kind of part of my story as well. It's the Bible story. You know, we got the Bible opening up with an immigration story there in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve into a forced migration east of Eden. And, you know, that's a through line. The people of God on the move. And then we got Jesus. The incarnation is God's migration to earth. Came from heaven to earth to show us the way, as we used to sing in church. And it ends at the very end of the Bible with a migration story, the heavenly kingdom, the New Jerusalem descending, migrating from heaven to earth to be with us.
So it's not a secondary issue biblically at all.
No, it's there. It's primary. It's the plot line. I read the incarnation of God, Jesus Christ, as a migrant story. That is where God is a migrant, come to be with us because God loves us. But in terms of the book, I wrote this book because over the years I've just, grown depressed with despair at our country and how we think about immigrants. And instead of just wallowing in all of that despair, I have these stories of these people I would meet on the way, Christians who are organizing themselves to welcome migrants. They would just kind of run in my head. And those stories, those people, their faces would give me hope. And I figured since I replay those stories in my head when I need some hope, I might as well share them on the page with others to give other people hope. I think so many times we think we look at our politics, migration politics around us in this country and think there's nothing we can do. And I want to say, hey, look, here's some people doing some things on the ground in their communities with their churches, Christians, good, faithful people. And if they can do it, we can too.
Are you an advocate of open borders?
So first thing I would say is, and when we think about open borders, we just need to acknowledge the fact that, I don't want to make too many assumptions, but I'm thinking that you all here on my screen, Steve and others, are all citizens of the United States. And for those of us I am also a citizen of the United States, and those of us who are citizens of the United States, we live in a world of open borders, pretty much. I mean, we've got it. We can go anywhere we want, pretty much. Maybe not, a few countries without even a visa. The world is our oyster. Borders mean nothing to us for the most part, in terms of where we want to travel, where we want to settle, where we want to move, visit friends.
Well, that's different, though, isn't it, from, a visa or a visit or a tourist is different than what we're talking about on this program when we talk about immigration, isn't it?
Well, I want to say we should be considering all of it together. So for you, Steve, for me, I can go to Canada without a visa. I can stay there for a long time. I can get a job in Canada pretty easily because I'm a U.S. citizen and they want U.S. citizens. So that's what I mean in terms of thinking from our position as U.S. citizens. The world, I mean, borders don't mean very much to us in terms, they're not an impediment for the world we want. Same thing with our money, our capital, our wealth, our retirement accounts. They flow across borders without any impediment at all. So for us, it's a world of open borders. And it is a little hypocritical, I think, when we all of a sudden say other people shouldn't have that right, that experience as well.
So, bottom line is you would like for us to have no borders and for people to come, whatever their background, whatever their language, their ethnicity, and their crimes and their downside, that's open. We should get rid of the fence and no longer in any way prevent anybody. By the way, and we'll talk about it when we get back. And I want to hear the stories because they're quite moving. And when you talk about open borders, there's hardly any country in the world that has open borders in the sense we're talking about. I think there is a lot that is open in a world that's pretty much connected, but not that in most countries. But we'll bring that up and we'll discuss it, and you're going to love some stories, and you need to hear them, and I do too when we come back. Don't go anywhere. Just like Jesus, we're coming back. Being with us. We're talking to Isaac Villegas, and his new book is Migrant God, A Christian Vision for Immigrant Justice. We have established that I think he's wrong and he thinks I'm wrong, which makes for a good conversation because we like each other. But this is a book you need to get. You really do. You're going to hear some stories in just a second that are quite moving. And if they don't move you and they don't bring out the compassion that is in you, you ought to doubt your salvation. So, Isaac, let's start off with some of your friends and let's hear some of those stories.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. We started off talking about open borders, and just to clarify for listeners out there, I mean, I don't talk about open borders at all in my book. I'm not a politician. I don't know policies out there. Like I'm happy to read the immigration policy. There's currently none on the table, so I don't know what to think. But what I try to do in the book is tell stories of people who are doing something. I think one of the problems we have as Christians is to think that the elite political voices in the world, that they know what they're doing, that they have the solutions, and we got to get on board with their plan. And what I'm saying is, well, let's just start a church. What are Christians doing? What are people doing in our communities? And maybe that should inspire our political vision. So that's why, as you're saying, I mostly tell stories of Christians doing stuff on the ground. I visit one shelter, a migrant shelter in Tijuana, for example. It's operated by a order of Catholic priests and nuns. And they have these shelters throughout Mexico, I think 4 of them. And the one there in Tijuana, I was there for a week. And they just feed folks and open their doors and do fundraising so that people who are caught on the other side, they have somewhere to stay. And that feels like Christian witness to me.
It is. If you meet somebody hungry, feed them. That's what it means to be a Christian. Talk about the guy who runs this.
Yeah, so Father Pat is what he's called. Grew up in Kansas City, so he's from Kansas, and was sent by his order to help manage that shelter down there. And yeah, he just believes that, like you're saying in Matthew 25, that when we feed people that are hungry, offer water, offer shelter, clothe the naked, that we do that for Jesus. Yeah, he believes that literally. It's literal words on the Bible. I mean, sometimes I like to remind people, I'm a biblical literalist. This stuff is true. Jesus said it, we do it, and he's doing it down there. One of the stories, one of the people I met was this woman from Mexico, from a state further in Mexico, further south from the border. And we were cooking in the kitchen together. She was making tortillas with her son. And she asked me to pray for her because she knew I was a pastor and she was going to be crossing the border, trying to cross the border at some point. And I was asking her why she left. Part of what I'm interested in is why people are leaving. Why do they need to migrate? What are the stories here? And she said the week before my visit there, when she left her home community that she grew up in, that her parents were from, her ancestors were from, that the cartel, the Sinaloa cartel, had threatened her son, who was 16 years old, and said, "Hey, look, we're going to jump him into the gang. He has two choices. He joins our gang, our cartel, or we kill him." And so that night, she packed up the bags and moved herself, her husband, and her child, going north, going to cross that border, trying to find her sister in Fresno, California. And I thought to myself, you know what? I'd probably do the same thing for the sake of the well-being of my child, threatened by a cartel. I'm going to provide for that kid.
Well, aren't there laws that speak to that specific situation? For instance, over 120,000 visas will be issued this coming year by our government. You don't hear that very much. But her literal fear for her son's life and her sister in California both would bode well for legal immigration, wouldn't it?
It would, yeah. I mean, I want that world, Steve. But there's currently it's the case that there is no asylum process. So there are visas offered for work permits, let's say. So if you work at Apple, Silicon Valley, and you need some labor from overseas, I mean, you can get yourself a visa for someone like that. If you're from South Africa and you're white, apparently you can be welcome into this country. But no, people who have what in the past have been able to come to this country for seeking asylum from protection because of their protected classes, there's no longer any process for them to come. They're at the very bottom of a line that doesn't move.
Oh, that's surprising because I know a lot of people who are here because of those laws and because of their fear.
That changed on January of this year.
Oh, I didn't know.
There used to be the case that there was this an app you could get when you're in Mexico, and you can apply for the asylum process, and that app has been discontinued by the current presidential administration. So
Well, I'll take your word
different
for
world
it,
now.
but I don't think those laws have been set aside. But listen, I am not an expert on this complicated issue, but it's good.
Yeah. Well, I like the fact. I mean, everybody has an opinion on this issue. I think what sets you apart is you're actually boots on the ground in serving people, and I think that kind of gives a little bit different level of weight to your perspective on the thing. And in your chapter on that place of refeed, it made me really hungry, by the way. You're talking about all the
Yes, this is an important point. The book very much, it's basically a food book. I should have included recipes. I mean, it's amazing after reading through it. I'm just like, you know what? I must be hungry all the time because I'm just writing about all the food I ate.
You're bad. That's not how you sell books.
And we're recording this right before lunch. Not really cool. And we could talk about this more on the other side of the break. So your service, like we just said, literally being the hands and feet of Jesus. But there's also a couple other ways where you're involved. One, literally putting yourself possibly at some degree of risk in doing what you think you should do. And the other is in preserving the stories and memories of migrants. So, would love to dive into that on the other side of the break when we have a little bit more room to roam.
Listen, the name of the book is Migrant God, a Christian Vision of Immigrant Justice. And it's not a political book per se. It's a great book that'll bring some tears when you read it. And it's a place where Christians need to be. Isaac and I don't agree on immigration policy, but I'll tell you, we agree that if you think the government knows what they're doing, you're crazy. You've been smoking something you probably shouldn't be smoking. So that's a good place to start. How screwed up politics really is. This is hard work. We're going to have a taco and rest up. We'll come back. Hey, thanks for this time with us. Very interesting conversation. Bono, U2 fame. And Matthew got this quote, and it's a great quote. He said, "Distance does not decide who is your brother and who is not. The church is going to have to become the conscience of the free market if it's to have any meaning in this world. Stop being its apologist." Bono refers to distance, but could we change the word distance to border? I wouldn't, but our guest would.
Before the break, Isaac, I teed up a couple questions. We had talked a little bit about your just boots on the ground kind of service, but you've also served folks there in North Carolina and I think it was Arizona, but you've done some interesting work in preserving the memories of those who were not successful in coming across the board. Tell us a little bit about those avenues.
Yeah, Alvaro Enciso. So Alvaro Enciso is in Arizona, Tucson there. Someone I got to know and wrote a chapter about him. He's an immigrant from Colombia. Came, I think, in the 60s, he told me. Came for the American dream, served in the military, became a citizen, served in the military, U.S. military. And over the years, he's just noticed that migrants just keep on dying in the desert there as they try to cross. And so he organizes his life. He's retired now. He organizes his life around every week. He goes out once a week and marks the spot with a cross where someone's remains were found. He's an artist, so in his workshop at home, he makes these crosses with found objects. So objects that he finds in the desert, what people have left behind. So let's say, rubber from a shoe that he finds from someone who died there in the desert, glass from a bottle, pictures from wallets. He finds wallets. He has no idea what all of these objects mean, other than that they are part of somebody's life and they are a plot line to a story that he'll never know, but he thinks those people should be honored. And so this is his devotional practice out there. And, very traditional in terms of a cross, something that we Christians mark our graves with, how we remember the dead as we await for resurrection. So it's just this powerful story. I mean, he's out there every week. In the database, currently, the coroner's department, coroner's office there in Arizona maintains a database of all the remains that they found. It's something like 4,000 people, and they have the GPS coordinates, which he uses to go plant his crosses. And so he says at this rate, he gets basically 3 crosses per week. He'll be 127 by the time he puts a cross out for every single one of those people who've died, as long as more people aren't found. But I just find him to be just a faithful person I should say, so he came here because for the American dream, And so his art project, this what he's doing out there, he calls it "Where Dreams Die," to remember all those people who came for the same kind of American dream, but couldn't make it across.
Did he come legally?
You know, Steve, I don't ask that of people.
Well, maybe it'd be a good thing to do.
Well, so this is what this is interesting.
If we're killing 4,000 people, and that breaks my heart, there may be a process that's different. My friend Tony Campolo, and you would like him because
I've met him. I've met Tony. Oh yeah.
well, he's my beloved friend. We did a television show for years together.
May he rest in peace. He's a good man, good, faithful man.
I talked to him 2 days before he died, and it was a sad goodbye conversation. But at any rate, Tony said the last time he was on here that he thought there ought to be a very high wall and a very wide gate. When he said it, I didn't understand, but when I thought about it, I thought that is so good and so wise. And I think if we don't have the high gate, the high wall, then people die and children get trafficked and drugs find their way into our country. But if we don't have a wide gate to go along with a high wall, we've got a serious problem. And because of some of the things that you bring up, the American dream isn't exclusive. It should be open to a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds. And so, if you are a conservative, and I am, and you fight for the high wall, don't forget to fight for the wide gate, too, because that's just as important as the high wall. We're out of time for this segment, but not quite, so we could sing a hymn or
take up a collection
or do something religious. But listen, get this book. It's a book that'll make you think and make you cry. It's called Migrant God, A Christian Vision for Immigrant Justice. You might disagree with the base, but you can't disagree with the compassion. We're called to love, to feed the hungry, to visit the prisons, to reach out to those who are on the bottom of the scale. And that's not up for a vote. We don't get a vote on that. It's just a matter of doing what Jesus said to do. Hey, don't go anywhere. We're coming back. We're having a civil conversation with Isaac Villegas and his book, Immigrant God, A Christian Vision for Immigrant Justice. As you know, this program provides a platform for a lot of different views and a place where we can discuss. By the way, you can keep up with Isaac at Isaac, and this is spelled Villegas, Isaac. G-A-S, I'm sorry. IsaacVillegas.com, and on Substack at Isaac S. Villegas, Substack.com.
Isaac, and a number of questions come to mind, and like one of them, and I guess it's safe to assume, for example, that most of the people that you're dealing with in terms of immigrants, if they had the right conditions in their home country, they would rather stay there.
Yeah, probably. Yeah,
and probably the most sort of ambitious ones are the ones that end up leaving.
Well, ambitious or just people desperate, like that woman
Yeah.
that I met, trying to save her son from death.
Yeah, a different type of ambition. Yeah, but the other
Yeah.
question I wanted to get to, and if you wanted to comment more on that, that'd be fine. But the idea of, and you point out a couple of examples where you with your group were participating in what we would classify as civil disobedience. And certainly Christians have, from the time of abolition, Underground Railroad, to civil rights, to pro-life protesters, and so forth. There are plenty of situations where Christians have been involved in civil disobedience, in contrast, certainly, to very clear instructions from Scripture on obeying the civil authorities and so forth. Can you talk a little bit about that? Give some context where that comes up, what your thinking and is on that.
Yeah, that's an important question. Thanks for bringing that up. So yeah, like you're saying in Romans, the book of Romans has that call Paul makes to obey governing authorities that you're quoting. But the scripture's diverse on this. So we also have in Acts 5 where Peter and the other disciples are called before the civil authorities and they say, you can't speak about Jesus anymore. You got to leave or else we're going to put you in jail. And Peter and the disciples have this line before the court. They say, well, sometimes we have to obey God instead of man. And this is a passage that people like Martin Luther King Jr., among others, would cite when they say, hey, look, there's a divine law that trumps any kind of earthly law, that at the end of the day, we'll follow God's law, God's command. So I think that's an important, and also just to think about Jesus, after all, the man gets killed on a cross, not because he's nice, but because he offends some pretty powerful people out there. So this call to obey God rather than man is what I think is part of this Christian call. So in my community, at my church, during the first Trump administration, there was a woman, a resident here, undocumented resident in our community, who had a case before the court. In previous administrations, if you have a case before the court, you're granted status so that you can show up to court. Trump revoked that and issued her a deportation notice immediately. She got a hold of us and we transformed an office at church into an apartment for her, and she lived at church for 2 years and we kept her safe. We went through training in de-escalation, just in case ICE agents would show up and trespass onto church property to de-escalate situations.
Church border, you mean? If they cross the church border, is that?
Church property. Yeah, so we would make sure that they wouldn't, take her away, and we kept her safe for 2 years. She continued to fight her case in court, and she won. And now she has a residency permit.
Good.
But yeah, that was an act of what you would call civil disobedience. So we were disobeying the law. There's laws about this sort of thing.
Well,
because we thought the higher law was God's law, and we traced it, like you're saying, there's abolition, an Underground Railroad, all these traditions going all the way back to the Bible with the cities of refuge is in the Old Testament, where there was designated areas that God ordained for people to be safe from prosecution, so things would cool down.
And the Ku Klux Klan practiced civil disobedience too. It's easy to bring up all the illustrations that are ones that are good, but there are a lot of bad people who violate those laws and should be in jail. And if you're going to participate in civil disobedience, you can't whine when you go to jail. Kathy?
Isaac, my question is sort of ridiculous because it's very simplistic and there's no simple answer. What is this? And I'm sorry because it does sound ridiculous. What is the solution? What is the solution here? Because I'm going to say from my perspective that I've read your book and and I'm amazed at the multiple ways that you all have reached out, and we're running out of time. But I also believe that there is a right way and a wrong way, and that it's necessary to obey law. So, do we need to step up to the plate and change law so that the opportunities are bigger than what they are now, what some people would say they are now? Because the way it is going now is not working. It's just not working.
Yeah, no,
I
I
don't know
agree
what
with
to
you.
do.
I agree with you. It's not working. And I mean, I hear you in saying that sometimes there aren't simple answers and the world's more complicated than we would like to think. But I just want to reiterate that I think God's commands on this stuff is pretty simple. It's just that when we follow it, our lives get complicated. So when Jesus says, feed anyone who asks, provide shelter, I'd say, yes, that's what we got to do. Only later do people say, oh, wait, we should check their citizenship status first. But that's not in the Bible. That's our complications. The Bible's very clear on. So when Jesus says, hey, look, this whole Christian thing is summed up in 2 commands. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. Neighbor, anybody out there is your neighbor. He doesn't say, there's no footnote in my Bible that says, oh, but make sure you check their documentation status first. Oh, make sure they're citizen neighbors first. You got to accept them all. You got to love them all.
Listen, thanks for being with us. That's you and I agree with the commandment. We disagree profoundly on its interpretation. But I want to check their status and what they have in their backpack when they come in so that my grandchildren don't get their drugs. So it is complicated. And you're a winsome guy and you're fun to talk to, and I hope we can do it again. God bless you, brother.
Thank you so much, Steve. Really appreciate you.
Hey, guys, we're going to come back and tell you who's going to get it next week. I really like Isaac. He reminds me of Tony in some ways. Profoundly disagree at some points, but agree at other points, because everybody who belongs to Jesus belongs to everybody who belongs to Jesus. Guys, this issue really is complicated. It's very complicated. And both sides of the issue, as you heard today, the people that want a wider gate and the people that want a higher wall never talk to each other. And we need, because there's a difference between a woman who wants to save her son and a guy who wants to give my son drugs. There's a difference in so many areas, and I believe that there need to be boundaries. We need to be very careful. We need to be thoughtful, but as a nation, we need to be compassionate too. And I sometimes think you don't find both of those things in the same particular political view. All we do is shout at each other, and we didn't do that today. And we're going to have more programs on with people with whom I and the people on this program disagree. And we're going to talk about some things, because nobody else is. You know, Isaac needs somebody to say to him, that's stupid. And I need somebody to say to me, but what you said is even more stupid than what I said. And then all of a sudden, conversation and communication begins to take place. So this was a good program, and it wasn't long enough. We need 2 or 3 hours off the air. Isaac and I agreed that if we could have a long time to sit down and talk, it would be amazing the places where we would agree. That, you know, we have the same view, the same Messiah, the same God, the same commandments. He's just wrong. And he would say exactly the same thing about me. And maybe I am a little wrong. And maybe he's a little wrong. And maybe we talk about it. Hey, Kathy, who's going to be on next week?
Next week, we have a new friend. His name is Luke Jolog, and his book is titled Sinner and Saint, A Surprising Primer for the Christian Life.
I get the saint part. I'm ordained.
Yeah.
But we'll talk to him anyway next week.
Well, the rest of us can cover the sinner part.
You can
Yeah.
carry
I wanna go with the
you
surprising
can do
part.
the center part. Hey, listen, join us. We'll be here same time, same place next week. And between now and then, don't do anything we wouldn't. That gives you a wide, wide berth.
It's because you didn't tell him to do it.